nobody sent anybody up in there. But the truth is, he's all you would let in there because you're too scared to deal with the rest of us. Now, in terms of why would an Ethiopian come to Israel to worship? Well, you just show you don't know your Bible. So let's go all the way back to Solomon and his temple dedication prayer. Start in verse 41. Also concerning the foreigner who is not of your people Israel, when he comes from a far country for your name's sake, for they will hear of your great name and your mighty hand and of your outstretched arm, when he comes and prays toward this house here in heaven, your dwelling place, and do according to all for which the foreigner calls to you, in order that all the peoples of the earth may know your name to fear you, as do your people Israel, and that they may know that this house which I have built is called by your name. So even Solomon himself answers your question, why? Why would a foreigner do this? Because they heard of his great name. Now, how would they do that? Well, let's look at a little history to find out. First, we'll start with the words of Jesus. Matthew 23:15. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you travel around on sea and land to make one proselyte. When he becomes one, you make him twice as much a son of hell as yourselves. Now, what is a proselyte? Here we have the exegetical dictionary of the New Testament. You see proselytos. And so we're just going to scroll down here to the definition. We notice under 1, it says it occurs 4 times in the New Testament and is used consistently there in accordance with the usage of Hellenistic Judaism as a technical term for a Gentile who has converted to Judaism, as a technical designation for men and women who, without descending from Jewish parentage, have become members of the Jewish cultic community or have joined it on the basis of a legally binding acceptance process. Now remember, it says non-Jewish parents. Now, how do these Bible dictionaries and scholarship, how do they all define Jewish? Well, originally it referred to the tribe of Judah and the southern kingdom, but it came to be used for all Israelites. So when we're talking about non-Jewish parentage, we're saying non-Israelite parentage. That's how these sources use this terminology. So we have a non-Israelite who converts and comes over. Here we have Philo of Alexandria and his writing on the special laws. He is a 1st century Hellenistic Jew that was born a bit before Jesus. And it says, and he receives all persons of a similar character and disposition, whether they were originally born so or whether they have become so through any change of conduct, having become better people, and as such entitled to be ranked in a superior class, approving of the one body, because they have not defaced their nobility by birth, and of the other because they have thought fit to alter their lives so as to come over to nobleness of conduct. And these last he calls proselytes, from the fact of their having come over to a new and God-fearing constitution, learning to disregard the fabulous inventions of other nations and clinging to unalloyed truth. Accordingly, having given equal rank and honor to all those who come over, and having granted to them the same favor that were bestowed on the native Jews, he recommends those who are ennobled by truth not only to treat them with respect, but even with especial friendship and excessive benevolence. And is not this a reasonable recommendation? What he says is this: those men who have left their country and their friends and their relations for the sake of virtue and holiness ought not to be left destitute of some other cities and houses and friends, but there ought to be places of refuge always ready for those who come over to religion. For the most effectual allurement and the most indissoluble bond of affection, goodwill is the mutual honoring of the one God. Moreover, he also enjoins his people that, after they have given the proselytes an equal share in all their laws and privileges and immunities, on their forsaking the pride of their fathers and forefathers, they must not give a license to their jealous language and unbridled tongue, blaspheming those beings whom the other body looks upon as gods, lest the proselytes should be exasperated at such treatment, and in return utter impious language against the true and holy God. For from ignorance of the difference between them, and by reason of their having from their infancy learned to look upon what was false as if it had been true, and having been bred up with it, they would be likely to err. And there are some of the Gentiles who, not attending to the honor due to the one God alone, deserve to be punished with extreme severity of punishment, as having forsaken the most important classifications of piety and holiness, and as having chosen darkness in preference to the most brilliant light, and having rendered their own intellect blind when it might have seen clearly. So notice that these are the ones who have left their fathers and forefathers. So these are not Israelites that are being discussed. And to round this out, we're going to read about Izates, who was king of a small kingdom in Mesopotamia called Adiabene. And it says, now during the time Izates abode at Charax-Spasini, a certain Jewish merchant whose name was Ananias got among the women that belonged to the king and taught them to worship God according to the Jewish religion. He, moreover, by their means became known to Izates and persuaded him in like manner to embrace that religion. He also, at the earnest entreatment of Izates, accompanied him when he was sent for by his father to come to Adiabene. It also happened that Helena, about the same time, was instructed by a certain other Jew and went over to them. So here we see numerous people being converted to Judaism by both Ananias and some other Jew who at the time was preaching as well. So you ask, why would an Ethiopian come to worship God, and why would he be reading Isaiah? Well, that's because people knew of the God of Israel, and Jews were actively preaching to other people about the God of Israel, and in doing so, they were converting over and becoming believers. So what you certainly have here with the Ethiopian eunuch is somebody who had become a proselyte. We know that Gentiles weren't accepted into the church until Acts chapter 10. But here in Acts chapter 8, we have an Ethiopian. Now, proselytes were considered fully integrated into the Jewish community, and so they were accepted. We see this in Acts 2, where they're among those preached to. In Acts chapter 6, we have Nicholas, a proselyte from Antioch, as a leader in the early church. So there's your answer. You show that you don't know history, you don't know the Bible, and it's no wonder you don't want to engage with us who are fully equipped to deal with your arguments, because if we were in your live and you said this to us, you would have got shut down with this and you would have looked embarrassed in front of all your people.